heard it breathe before I ever saw it. Not a growl, not a snarl, just slow, deep, deliberate breathing. The kind a big animal makes when it already knows you've seen too much, when it knows you're not getting away. Back then, I didn't have a name for it, not yet. But I remember the weight of that breath pressing against the trees, the tents, my chest. I remember thinking, bears don't breathe like that. But that wasn't the beginning. The beginning was just another backcountry assignment. I was part of a seasonal trail crew contracted to help clear storm damage along one of Yellowstone's lesser-used routes, an old connector trail near the Thorofare. If you don't know the area, that's normal. Most hikers stick to the boardwalks and the geysers and the tourist pullouts where a bison standing 100 yards away is treated like a close-quarters threat. But the Thorofare is different. It's wilderness in the old sense. Days from help, no cell service, no easy exits. The kind of place where a broken ankle becomes a survival situation. That's why crews like ours go out. Chainsaws, Pulaskis, crosscut saws, the works. You clear blowdowns, re-bench washed-out trail, haul out whatever trash last year's hunters or horsepackers left behind. I didn't know the names of half the peaks on the map, I just knew I needed the job. I'd worked trail in Montana the previous season, but this was my first contract inside Yellowstone proper. Bigger pay, harder terrain, reputation that sticks. There were 4 of us on the crew. Mason, the crew lead, mid-30s, lived for the job. Could sharpen a saw faster than most people could open a beer. Holt, ex-Forest Service, quiet, carried a notebook he didn't let anyone read. Viv, tough as nails, barely spoke in camp but would out-hike anyone if you pushed her. And me, 26, here to prove I could keep up. Our packer dropped us off at the trailhead with the usual send-off joke. If you hear banjo music, hike faster. We laughed, because that's what you do when the alternative is thinking about just how far from help you really are. The first 2 days were standard enough, deadfall clearing, brushing trail corridor, slow but straightforward work. The weather was good, the river crossings were low. The forest felt normal, except for one thing. It was quiet, not silent, just off. You spend enough time in the woods and you learn what background alive feels like. The constant insects, the distant jays, the rustle of small things in the underbrush. The Thorofare had all of that, but it felt like it was waiting, like the forest had its attention focused inward, listening for something else. I mentioned it to Holt around the fire the second night. He looked up from his notebook. "You hear it too?" he asked. "Hear what?" He tapped the page. The pauses. I didn't ask what that meant. On the 3rd day, we found the first tree. A lodgepole pine, maybe 70 feet tall, snapped 5 feet above the ground. Not rotted, not lightning struck, just broken, clean, like something had pushed it over. "Wind," Mason said, but his voice didn't carry the usual certainty. Then we noticed the trunk. Something had raked long grooves through the bark. Not claw marks, not quite. They were long, shallow, and spaced unevenly, like fingers. But that didn't make sense. Bears can stand, sure, but they don't drag their claws in patterns. Not like that. We kept moving, but the mood shifted. Viv stopped humming while she hiked. Holt stopped riding. Mason checked our perimeter twice that night before bed. Then came the silence. Not just quiet, empty. No birds, no insects, no wind moving the branches. The kind of silence that feels like pressure, like the air is thick, like sound is being swallowed. We were sitting around the fire when it happened. One moment, normal. The next, the entire forest went still in an instant. Mason looked up. Viv froze. Holt put his hand on his axe, not dramatically, just slowly. like his body had made the decision for him. "Predator," Mason whispered. "Close." But no predator I know announces itself with silence. We waited. No one spoke. Then we heard it. A single slow exhale from the trees behind us, not close, not far, right at the edge of the firelight. If you've ever had the feeling that something is staring at you in the dark, you know what that moment felt like. Your skin crawls before your mind catches up. We didn't see eyes. We didn't see movement. But I swear to you, it was standing upright. I could feel the height of it. The forest didn't feel big enough to hold it. No one slept that night. Not really. We didn't speak of it in the morning, but every one of us knew. We weren't here to clear trail anymore. We were being observed, and whatever was watching had already gotten close enough to breathe on us in the dark. We broke camp earlier than necessary. None of us admitted aloud that we were retreating, but there was no reason to linger. We were supposed to work another 6 days out there, but the silence hadn't lifted overnight. No birdsong at dawn, no insect whine, just the hiss of the creek and the sound of my own breathing. We packed fast. Mason didn't say much, just kept glancing into the trees like something might step out at any moment. Viv double-checked the fuel bottles. Holt walked the perimeter again, notebook in his hand, scanning the tree line as if he expected the forest to blink. We hiked single file along a bench cut into the hillside, trail faint and narrow. I kept my eyes forward, but I could feel it, the sense that we were being followed, not stalked, followed, tracked, studied. When we reached the downed tree we'd marked the day before, something stopped us cold. The blowdown wasn't just where we'd left it. It had been moved. Not rolled, not dragged. Rearranged. 3 sections of the trunk now lay parallel, side by side, like someone had taken the time to create a barrier across the trail. "It's blocking our exit," Viv said quietly. Mason crouched beside the logs. "Hoof prints?" he asked. "Number. Footprints. But not human. The impressions were deep, too deep. The stride was long, too long. And the shape. They were almost wolf prints, but elongated. The pads were wider, the claws dug deeper, and behind each front print, there was a second impression, like it had shifted weight backwards, onto its hind legs. Holt knelt beside them. "It keeps off the main trail," he said. "It only crosses where we cross." "You sure?" Mason asked. Holt opened his notebook. Every night he'd been writing, sketching too. Now he flipped the pages to show us. On each page, diagrams, patterns, distances, tracking marks. He had already known. "This thing's been pacing us since the first day," he said, staying just out of sight, watching our camp at night, testing distance, testing response. "You knew," Viv said, anger sharp and sudden. "I suspected," Holt corrected. "Their stories. Ranger forums, old trapper journals. Not bear, not wolf, something else." I didn't want to say anything without proof. "Well," I said, my voice shaking, "I'd call this proof." We cut through the barrier carefully, hands on tools, heads turned always toward the trees. The forest felt like a throat, and we were inside it. Every shadow seemed to breathe. We pushed deeper along the trail, but something was wrong. We weren't gaining distance. Hours passed and the terrain didn't match the map. Valleys where there should have been ridges, drainages running the wrong direction. It was like the forest had shifted overnight. No, worse, we had been moved. I didn't see how, not then, but the realization hit slowly, like cold leaking into bone. "What direction are we heading?" I asked. Mason checked the compass. His jaw tightened. Northwest. That's wrong, Viv whispered. We should be southbound, back toward the trailhead. We were being guided, not by accident, not by disorientation, by intent. We set camp early, if you can call it camp. No fire, no talking, just a small clearing by the river with enough open space that we could see something coming. If it wanted to be seen. The sun went down in a smear of dying red. The cold came up the valley in a slow, crawling wave. The trees creaked. The water hissed. The world felt stretched too thin. Then we heard it. Not breathing this time. Footsteps, slow, heavy, bipedal, coming from the trees. Then stopping, right outside the last thread of fading daylight. Viv gripped her axe. Mason lifted a flare but didn't light it. Holt whispered, "Don't move. Don't speak. Don't acknowledge I didn't ask why. I already knew. This thing wanted reaction. It wanted fear to shape us." The footsteps circled the camp. Once, twice, 3 times, then stopped behind me. A low voice spoke, not English, not any language I recognized, but the cadence, the intent. It was speech, deep, chest-born, resonant, like words being formed with vocal cords not shaped for them. I wanted to turn. Every instinct screamed to look, but Holt's hand shot out and gripped my wrist, hard. "Don't." The voice went quiet. Then something dragged its claws slowly, deliberately, across a tree trunk behind me. Scrape, 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 marking us. Marking territory, marking memory. The silence afterward felt like a held breath. Then it walked away. Not fled, not retreated, just left, like it had made its point. No one slept again. Sometime near dawn, Holt finally spoke. "It's not hunting us," he said. "It's pushing us. It wants us somewhere." "Where?" I asked. He swallowed. "Where it kills things." By morning, we all understood the same thing without saying it. We could not go back the way we came. The trail had vanished behind us, swallowed by the forest or by whatever mind was directing us deeper. The only option was forward, northwest, toward a point none of us could name. Mason spread the map across his knee. The paper fluttered in the cold wind that didn't touch the trees. "We go 2 more miles," he said, his voice low, eyes hard. "There's an old line cabin up ahead. Rangers used to use it before this trail was decommissioned. If it's still standing, we can regroup." "And if something's waiting there?" Viv asked. He didn't answer. We moved in silence. The forest changed as we hiked, subtle at first. The trunks grew tall and straight like cathedral pillars. The ground flattened, underbrush thinned. The air itself felt dense, heavy, holding its breath with us. And the markings started. Trees with long vertical gouges down the bark. Not claw marks, signs, communication, territory, warnings. They formed a pattern, a path. Some fresh, some old, some so weathered they were nearly grown over. Generations of purpose layered on top of each other. Holt stopped at one of them and traced his fingers along the grooves. "It's directing us," he murmured. "No," I said. "It's corralling us." He nodded once. Wolves heard prey, too. 2 hours later, we saw the cabin. A small one-room structure tucked into a meadow clearing near a slow-moving bend in the river. Roof sagging, chimney slumped to one side. The kind of place that should have been reclaimed by weather a decade ago. But it was intact, preserved, maintained. That alone felt wrong. Mason approached first, axe in hand, shoulders tight. The door hung slightly open, like it had been left ajar recently. He pushed it wide. Inside was a cot, a rusted stove, a table, and on that table, a lantern. A modern one, fuel-based, clean, full, wick trimmed. Someone had been here, recently. Viv checked the corners. Holt scanned the floor. I stepped inside slowly, expecting movement in every shadow. But the cabin was empty. At least, it was now. Mason spoke quietly. "We hole up here for the night. Rotate watch. No fire, no noise. If something comes to that door, we do not open it." We nodded. None of us wanted to argue. We were already operating on borrowed sanity. But when Holt sat on the cot, the frame creaked and something fell from under the mattress. A ranger's logbook, sun-bleached, water warped at the edges, but pages intact, and on the inside cover, property of Ranger Daniel Shaw, stationed 1994. Do not let it follow you. Mason turned the page. The entries began normal. Weather notes, wildlife sightings, pass-through hikers. Then the tone shifted. Day 18, heard something pacing again last night. 2 legs, heavy. Pretends to be farther than it is. Day 25, I saw it. I think I saw it. Tall. Wrong. I shine not like wolf. More like a person holding a flame behind their teeth. Day 31. It watches from the trees. It never comes close. It's not hunting me. It's keeping me here. Day 44. If you are reading this, it knows about you now. That was the last complete entry. The pages after that were scratched over, ink gouged so hard it cut through the paper, like the writer had tried to erase the words from existence. I felt something watching us. I turned slowly to the doorway. Outside the tree line, just where the meadow met shadow, a silhouette stood, massive shoulders, long arms, head angled forward, like it was listening. It was upright, but not human. My breath froze, stuck in my chest. The cabin walls suddenly felt too thin, too temporary, too mortal. Viv whispered, "Don't move." The creature didn't come closer. It just stood there, framed by the gloom, the shape of it impossibly still. Then it stepped backward, not turned, not walked, stepped backward into the trees and vanished, as if it had simply been swallowed. The silence that followed hurt, like a pressure change deep in the skull. Mason closed the logbook slowly. "It's not the cabin it wants," he said. I could barely get the words out. "Then what?" He nodded toward the river, toward the dark water moving slow and deep, toward the valley bending away into dense, ancient timber. "That," he said, "and whatever's buried in those woods." Holt closed his eyes. "It's not leading us to its territory." A beat of stillness. "It's leading us to its home." The temperature dropped so fast the lantern glass fogged. Something howled downstream. Not wolf, not coyote. Something that knew how to shape the night into fear. The cabin no longer felt like shelter. It felt like a waiting room for whatever came next. We didn't run far. The ground told us where to stop. a lattice of elk tracks circling the same deadfall, over and over, as if hooves had paced a prayer. Beyond that, the lodge poles grew so tightly together they braided their own shade. Every sound we made snapped off at our boots. Even the steam drifting from a distant vent seemed to move without a hiss. "Here," I whispered, and dropped to a knee. The earth was soft as bread under the pine duff, freshly turned. Nate raised the beam of his headlamp. In the white cone, claw marks arcing through soil, deep as fingers into wet clay. Not bear, not cat. 5 splayed digits with a 6th gouged like a spur where a dewclaw should be, only lower. Wrong. Jess tugged my sleeve. Her mouth formed words she didn't dare voice. "We shouldn't be here." The ridge above us quivered as if something heavy had shifted its weight. It wasn't wind. The trees didn't answer. They stood there, all that tall, silent witness, and my throat went dry with the memory of Boysen's map, the neat stack of red X's he'd penciled into the blank space between 2 fire scars, where nobody camped long, where radio check-ins went to snow. The smell hit first, wet fur and pennies. Then a shape unstitched itself from between 2 boles and stood, tall enough that for a heartbeat my brain named it a skinny bear, but the proportions were wrong. The head was all muzzle and serrated grin, the ears too forward, the shoulders a cathedral of knotted muscle. It leaned, not like a bear on hind legs, but like something built to be upright and furious. It watched us with the patience of a butcher. I lifted the flare Boysen had given me, the one he'd called a last resort. The striker rasped uselessly, once, twice, then caught with a spit of magnesium. Red washed over the trunks and painted the thing in raw living color. Its pupils notched, thin. It didn't flinch. "Back," Jess breathed. We did. 1 step, then 2, bowing under branches that scooped at our packs. The creature advanced in the negative space between trees, always angling, a chess player herding pawns. When it crossed the elk circle, it paused and sniffed the ground as if reading a memo. Then its hackles rose. I realized the tracks weren't loops at all. They were a ring, a warning, maybe a boundary, maybe a trap. "Thermals," Nate whispered, and he pointed left. The flare hissed and gouted sparks onto the needles. Through the trunks, the steam of an unnamed geyser pulse-lit in dull moonlight. I knew what he was thinking. Geothermal vents mess with scent and heat. Maybe the only cover we had left. The thing blinked once, an almost human deliberation, and stepped toward us. We broke. Branches whipped my face. My breath tore. The forest folded inward, swallowing our footfalls. Behind us came the soft, steady tread of something that had never once tripped. I didn't look back. I kept the flare low to keep from blinding us, and in its red sputter we dove through a chute of saplings and burst into a basin pocked with tobacco-colored pools. Calcium shelves gleamed slick and treacherous. The air stank of sulfur and metal. The heat rolled in damp sheets. Jess skidded, regained her feet. "Boardwalk!" she shouted, and for a moment I thought she'd lost it. There were no trails here. But then I saw it too. A run of old planks, weather-silvered and half-swallowed by sinter, tracing a line through the vent field toward a darker shape beyond. The thing didn't hesitate. It entered the heat as if stepping into rain. The flare's red washed its fur to rust. Steam braided its outline until it appeared in pieces, here a shoulder, there a hand. It moved slower now, head cocked, as if listening to a frequency we couldn't hear. We sprinted the boardwalk. It groaned under us, planks flexing over scalding mouths of earth. Jess's boot punched through once, Nate yanked her free with a grunt that sounded like tearing cloth. I risked a glance back. The thing was pacing the boards too, light on those backwards bent legs, nose high. Clever. Learning. "Gatehouse," Nate panted, pointing. The dark shape we'd seen wasn't rock at all, but a squat ruin of timbers, an old service hut from before the new trails rerouted, half collapsed, door hanging like a broken jaw. If we made it inside, we'd choke on the heat. But maybe we'd have walls. Maybe a second to think. We hit the threshold together and fell into the dim, the flare painting every nail head as a red star. Shelves leaned, glass bottles rolled with labels sloughed by time. A rusted fuse box clung to the wall, its porcelain fuses lined like teeth. Something about that made my brain click. "Kill the light," I said. Jess stared. "Are you kidding? Just do it." I smothered the flare against the concrete floor with my boot. The red went out with a hiss like an animal's last protest. Silence roared in. The heat pressed our ears. Outside, a shadow moved across the gap of the door. The creature drew near. I pictured its ears triangulating, eyes picking up the faintest gleam, lungs, tasting us. I slid my hand along the wall until my palm bumped the fuse box. I popped it open. Inside, a ragged tangle of old wire braided into modern splices. Somebody had come here after the fact and piggybacked newer lines onto older bones. My fingers found a switch the size of a tongue depressor. Above it, a plaque so scabbed with mineral that I had to scrape it with a thumbnail to read. "The emergency vent purge." "Don't," Jess mouthed, but my mind had already leapt. The vent field wasn't just pretty pools. It was lungs. It in and exhaled on schedules posted in buildings like this, controlled not to protect the earth but to keep tourists from getting cooked. I waited for the shadow to fill the door. Then I threw the switch. The ground under us thumped like a buried drum. Outside, every pool shivered. Steam hammered upward in sudden white columns, a dozen geysers breathing out at once. The hut filled with hot fog. The creature howled, a sound like a wolf made of broken glass, and stumbled backward off the boardwalk. Wood popped. A plank snapped. Something big fell and hit the center crust with a sound too wet. We didn't wait to see if it climbed back up. We bolted through the door and followed the boardwalk the other way, deeper into steam that erased the world a step at a time. The heat seared our throats raw. I held onto Nate's pack strap like a lifeline and felt Jess's fingers hooked into mine, bone to bone. Somewhere to our right, wood exploded. Somewhere to our left, something swam under the crust, breathing through cracks. Ahead, the boardwalk ended at a fence. Beyond it, dark. A service road? A fire break? I hit the gate and found it wired shut with a loop of coat hanger. My hands wouldn't listen. They fumbled, stupid in the heat. Jess shouldered me aside with a curse I'd never heard her use and twisted the wire in a deft, vicious turn. It snapped. We spilled through. Behind us, the howl came again, closer this time and lower, half a throat gurgling on steam. It wasn't dying. It was angry. The road ran flat and blessedly dull underfoot. Cougar scat, elk prints, the stamp of maintenance truck tires, signposts of a world that obeyed rules. We ran until the steam fell away and the air cooled to a knife. When we finally stopped, the first sound we heard was our own breathing. Then, faintly, another sound returned to the forest. A small insect buzz. One cricket, then two. The silence had loosened. Not gone, never gone, but cracked enough to let a noise through. We didn't speak. We didn't look back. We followed the road's pale ribbon until the trees thinned and, far off, a red eye winked through the branches. A radio tower light, blinking its patient, human Morse. Somewhere between us and that light, something moved parallel, never breaking brush, never announcing itself. It kept pace like a rumor that refuses to die. We kept walking, and the trees, very slowly, began to remember how to whisper. We didn't speak for the first hour. The forest around us had sound again, small, fractured sound, but sound. A cricket trill, the wing beat of a raven overhead, the soft patter of meltwater threading down from higher ridges. It should have been comforting, but it felt wrong, like the woods were slowly remembering what alive was supposed to sound like, as if something had stopped listening. We followed the maintenance road toward the blinking red tower light. 3 miles, maybe 4. Hard to tell by then. Exhaustion makes distance melt. Shoes rubbed raw places into my heels. My shoulders ached from the pack. Jess kept swaying sideways, catching herself just before she drifted into the ditch. Nate didn't speak at all. He just stared ahead, jaw locked, pupils blown wide. Every so often a branch snapped in the trees parallel to us. Not close, not far, just following. It had stopped trying to herd us, but it hadn't stopped tracking. When the service station finally came into view, a squat cement block building with a metal roof and a chain-link fence, I almost didn't believe it was real. The sight of human angles and straight lines made something in my chest loosen. I could have dropped to my knees right there. But Mason didn't. He slowed, raised a hand, listened. We all did. Nothing moved in the clearing. No birds on the roof. No wind through the vents. The world held itself still again, like a match waiting to be struck. Then the forest exhaled behind us. A single, heavy step. Mason didn't look back. Inside, now. We ran. The gate squealed. The door slammed. Mason threw the deadbolt and jammed a metal chair under the knob for good measure. The air inside tasted of oil and dust. Old fire extinguishers hung in lines on the wall. A tool bench held wrenches large enough to fix snowcats. A radio sat on a shelf like a relic from another century. Jess lunged for it. "Does it work?" Mason flicked the power switch. Nothing. He opened the battery compartment. Empty. Whatever used this place last had drained it, carefully, purposefully. I turned toward the window. In the tree line just beyond the chain-link fence, a shape stood. Not hunched now, not hiding. Full height, full silhouette, facing us. It was tall enough to look down on elk. Its arms hung long enough that its fingers skimmed the tops of brush. Its chest rose and fell in slow, deep breaths. And its eyes, God. Its eyes were not animal. They reflected light like they belonged to something that understood recognition. It wasn't hunting. It was remembering us. The chain-link fence rattled as if something brushed against it, just lightly, just enough to remind us how thin the distance really was. Jess whispered, "It followed us out of its territory." "No," Holt said quietly, voice shaved thin. "It never had a territory. The forest is its body. The silence is where it looks out." Mason stepped back from the window. "We wait until daylight, then we move, no stopping, no breaks. We walk until we hit a trailhead or a road or a ranger station. We do not split up. We do not talk to anything in the trees. We do not answer if it calls our names." None of us argued. We slept in shifts, if you can call the shallow, twitching half-dreams sleep. I swear I heard it pacing outside, sometimes close, sometimes distant, sometimes right outside the door. Dawn came, cold and pale. The clearing was empty. The fence was undisturbed. The world was alive again. Birds, insects, wind. Too alive, like something had lifted its hand from the world's throat. We walked. No one talked, no one looked back. We reached a ranger station just after midday, a real one. Fresh swept porch, stacked wood, radio antenna humming with life. A ranger leaned against the railing sipping coffee like the world still made sense. He saw us and blinked. "Trail maintenance crew, right? You're early. Everything okay out there?" Mason opened his mouth, closed it, looked at me, and I realized if we said what happened, we'd never be believed. We'd be dismissed, laughed at, filed under campfire stories and high-altitude panic. Or worse, someone would send another crew out there to verify it. So I said the only thing I could. Storm damage was worse than expected. The ranger nodded like that explained everything. Happens. Forest is always changing. Number, not changing. Responding. We signed out. We loaded our packs into the back of the truck. We didn't speak during the drive. The trees blurred past like ribs of something enormous. And when we crossed the park boundary, when the pines gave way to open land and the air felt thinner, lighter, only then did I breathe. That was months ago. I don't work trail crew anymore. Can't. Not after knowing the silence has a shape. Not after knowing something walked behind me for days and could do it again whenever it wanted. But some nights, when the wind dies and the crickets stop and my house goes too quiet, I hear it. That slow, deep breath. The sound of something remembering me. And I know, we didn't escape the forest. We just left its sightline. It's still out there, waiting for the world to go quiet again, so it can open its eyes. If you made it this far, thank you for staying with me by the fire. Stories like this stick to you. They follow you home. They wait for the quiet moments. Maybe that's just the mind trying to make sense of fear. Or maybe some places in this world really do watch us back. Either way, if you've ever been deep in the woods and felt the trees go still, you understand. If you enjoyed tonight's story, please consider subscribing. It helps more than you know, and it keeps this campfire burning. Leave a comment below. Tell me where you want us to go next. A lighthouse on the edge of the Arctic? An abandoned mine in the Smokies? A national park they tell you not to hike after dark? We go together, one lantern glow at a time. Until then, stay warm, stay watchful, and if the forest ever goes silent, don't look toward the trees.